Hello again, another story time with Jay. How could I forget? This episode, I'm choose the book Why WooWoo Works: The Science Behind Meditation, Reiki, Crystals, and Other Alternative Practices. It's written by David R. Hamilton, PhD. It's a really easy book to read, actually. And as a Reiki master practitioner and healer, and one who dives into the alternative realms, it's I'm really concerned with science. I want evidence, but I also embrace the woo. And I think this book is a really interesting take because it gives a lot of evidence. Let me just read the back. Alternative therapies, healing modalities, and spiritual practices are often referred to as woo woo, but many of these approaches are actually supported by compelling scientific evidence. In this dynamic and thought provoking book, David R. Hamilton, PhD, dives deeper into the true nature of consciousness and presents the cutting edge research behind energy healing, crystals, meditation, and more. You'll discover the science behind some of today's most popular alternative practices, how your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs have healing power, the benefits of nature and a holistic approach to healing, a fascinating link between consciousness and human connection, and the relationship between suppressed emotions and disease. The ideas behind some of these holistic therapies have been around for millennia, and now it's time to embrace the scientific truth behind their incredible healing power. Yay! So let's dive in. I am going to read part of the chapters are quite long, so I'm going to read part of the chapter Trapped and Released Emotion. This is particularly of interest to me because of the work that I do with my clients in releasing their negative emotions and beliefs. And so it speaks to me. So I thought I'd just read a little bit of this chapter. Let's go. Trapped and Released Emotion. I was walking by a river with my dog Oscar one day when I spotted a group of swans. This is new, he must have thought. He was quite young at the time and hadn't yet encountered these creatures, and as he did with every dog or person he ever saw, he went over to say hello. And as he approached the swans, one stretched its wings wide open, made a loud rasping sound, and moved towards him. Oscar took fright and ran back to me with a wee yelp. Once safely by my side, he shook himself vigorously as if he'd just emerged wet from the river and was drying himself, then urinated on a tree before running off to play with his ball. It was as if nothing had happened. We could learn a lot from animals if we paid them enough attention, although I'm not suggesting you should urinate on a tree or anything like that when someone's mean to you. Shaking it off is an instinct that some animals have which allows them to release the effects of stress, fear, or some other negative emotion from their nervous system, and something similar works for humans too. Movement, exercise, dance, yoga, or even a dog-style shake can all help us relieve from some pent-up emotions that many of us accumulate on an almost daily basis. But why is it that negative emotions build up in the body in the first place? A two-way street. Science has shown that the mind affects the body and the body affects the mind. Emotional tension usually creates physical tension in the neck and shoulders. Some people grind their teeth, while others suffer from tension headaches as the muscles above and behind the eyes contract. A tired mind is often mirrored in a tired body. Chronic stress, overwhelm, or even depression can leave a person feeling physically exhausted. Fear causes hairs on the back of the neck to rise. A blush usually follows the feeling of self-consciousness, embarrassment, or shame. Sexual excitement produces an erection in males and erect nipples in females. We also smile when we feel happy. We don't have to remember to smile, it happens spontaneously. Similarly, we don't have to remember to scrunch up our face or tense our jaws and shoulders when we feel stressed. These things happen by themselves. The body is a mirror of our mental and emotional states. We're all familiar with these physical effects of emotion because they're so commonplace, and they tell us our feelings aren't just in our mind. Prolonged stress can build up in the body. It's first noticeable in the muscles, most obviously on those on the face, but it also lodges in the upper body, leaving us with knots in our shoulders and a sore neck. And this is why massage feels so good. Releasing the tension from the muscles often simultaneously releases it from the mind, from which causes the physical tension. Sometimes a massage will release a little bit of tension, enough to ease us into a relaxed and soothed state. Other times, if the therapist prods deeply enough, despite the physical pain, the release can feel nothing short of sublime. And there are times when it can produce such a large emotional release that it leaves the recipient in tears. This two-way street, in which the mind affects the body and vice versa, is why tensing the jaw and shoulders or making jerky movements aren't just things you do when you're stressed. In themselves, they can actually make you feel stressed. It's why shaking it off can help to remove pent-up emotions that aren't lodged too deeply. And it's also why engaging in vigorous exercise at the end of a working day can go some way to relieving much of the stress we've accumulated in our muscles. An accumulation of stress. Why is it that the body seems to be in sync with our emotional states? Long before our early ancestors developed language, they communicated their feelings through facial expressions, body language, and physical gestures. Happy states were communicated with bright eyes and a smile, sadness with a frown, and anger through raised vocalizations and aggressive physical posturing. Anthropologists tell us that these expressions are consistent across all cultures, even those that have been isolated from civilization until only recently, which has convinced them that they're innate. Over eons, emotional states simply become correlated with their physical expression, so that today each emotion has a physical counterpart. Emotions leave charges in our muscles and our nervous system as we tense our body in response to mental and emotional stress. Over time, these emotional charges can add up. Repeated stress not only accumulates in our muscles, it also builds up in our nervous system. Stress stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, the flight or fight portion of the autonomic nervous system, ANS. ANS activity increases when we're under stress and decreases when we feel calm, and it's not designed to be in a heightened state for long periods. Many of us push our pain and negative emotions deep inside our body, as if we're stuffing old clothes into a box and closing the lid. However, while we've experienced the temporary sense of calm this can bring, the more we contain our negative emotions in this way, the less likely they are to remain hidden from view. Eventually, when our buttons are pressed, they'll explode out of us in a blaze of anger or tears. And this can happen at seeming randomly moments or in response to a particular person's words or behavior, or even when we hear a sound or a situation reminds us or reminds the body of a past traumatic experience. There can be serious physical effects to bottling up our pain and negative emotions, especially if we never release them. The role of personality in disease. The idea that there could be a link between mental and emotional states and disease was once considered pseudoscience. In 1985, an editorial in the New England Journal of Medicine made mainstream position at the time quite clear. This supposed connection was, it said, largely folklore. However, in the years since, sufficient evidence has accumulated to turn that position completely on its head. In the book When the Body Says No, Gabor Mate, physician and internationally renowned expert on trauma, addiction, and child development, remarks that such dismissals are no longer tenable. Research now shows a clear connection between some aspects of personality and a person's susceptibility to specific diseases. For example, studies have revealed a link between type C personality and the thickness and prevalence of some cancerous tumors. The type C personality is described as cooperative, unassertive, passive, patient, and suppresses negative emotion. Type C individuals tend to repress negative emotions, especially anger, but at the same time, they often try hard to maintain an outward appearance of happiness. So strong is this connection that in her research, Lydia Temashok, former professor of medicine at the University of Maryland in the USA, referred to the type C personality as cancer prone. Some researchers have shown links between the type C personality and some cancers, including breast cancer. For example, a 1991 study that assessed the personality traits of more than 600 with cancer of the colon or rectum found when compared with a matched control group, they showed elements of denial and repression of anger and other emotions. And a large Johns Hopkins University study that began in the 1940s and ran for around 40 years reported that cancer patients tend to deny and repress conflictual impulses and emotions to a higher degree than do other people. Before we go any further, let me make it clear that such research findings do not imply that repressed emotion causes cancer, only that there's a correlation between them. Negative emotions don't cause cancer, but people of the same personality type often have similar coping styles, and some styles generate higher levels of psychological stress or physiological stress than others. And this in itself doesn't cause disease, but it can increase the risk by upsetting the immune system and the body's natural homeostatic balance. When combined with a person's genetic predisposition and some environmental factors, a cancer recipe can more readily brew in a type C personality body. Other personality types are connected to different conditions. In one of her studies, Temashok compared personality traits among patients who have malignant melanoma, cardiovascular disease, and a control group with no medical conditions. She found that the malignant melanoma patients tended to deny being upset or anxious and were more likely to suppress negative emotions, type C. On the other hand, cardiovascular disease patients were more likely to be type A personality. While type C people suppress anger, type A people much more freely express it, but to the extent that they have a particular attitude and a tendency to be outwardly aggressive. Anger, hostility, and the heart. Research has now also strongly linked anger, hostility, and aggression with coronary artery disease. In fact, a doctor can sometimes obtain as much information about a person's risk of cardiovascular disease from a short personality questionnaire as they can from one that asks about diet and lifestyle. From 1950s, research began to show that type A personality males, aggressive, hostile, excessively driven, competitive, time-conscious, and dominant, had higher incidences of cardiovascular disease than any other personality types. More recent research has shown that it's anger and hostility component of the personality that's related to coronary artery health, not the personality type itself. Hostility is generally thought of as an expressed contempt or an aggressive attitude. It's composed of three parts: cognitive, affective, and behavioral. The cognitive, mental part is that hostile people typically have negative beliefs about and cynical attitudes towards others, particularly around the idea that others are motivated by their own selfish concerns. Hostile people also tend to be mistrusting of others and even paranoid. The affective part The affective part can be broad, ranging from anger to rage, and hostile people are usually irritable and resentful. Hostility tends to be expressed verbally or physically, either with aggression or passive aggression. Verbal aggression is one of the most common form, and it's done spitefully, hatefully, resentfully, with sarcasm, or argumentatively with the person taking an opposing stance, seemingly for the sake of it. In other words, it starts with the belief and attitude which produce a feeling that's expressed as an angry outburst, often with verbal or physical aggression. While all this paints an apparently negative picture of hostile people, I think that most of us, in certain moments of our lives, have shown hostility in our responses to particular people, say, or to particular circumstances. Feeling angry or hostile from time to time will do little or no harm. It's being consistently hostile over long spans of time that can be damaging. Consistent hostility usually betrays some underlying hurt, and it's been said that people who are the most aggressive are often the most hurt or afraid, and that those who act the strongest are often the ones who feel or have felt the weakest. I'm going to call it there, but you can see that this chapter goes on with the roots of hostility, adverse childhood experiences, um, depression, immune system, the impact of neglect, releasing trauma and suppressed emotion, words that heal, and developing self-awareness, and then some energy work, conscious breathing practices, and how they affect the release. I think it's fascinating. This book is such an easy read. I actually read it on Audible with Professor David Hamilton reading it in his cute Scottish accent, and I highly recommend this book. It's amazing. It just shows how far the woo has come, and actually how much it has a deep, deep, deep history and success rate. And the releasing of those negative emotions, which I do with my clients on a regular basis, has such a powerful effect on our health. So I hope you enjoyed that. I would love to hear your feedback. I enjoyed reading this to you very much, and I will see you in the next story time.